Welcome, everyone, and you are listening to The Last Dinosaur, and I'm your host, Chris Aversano. Today's guest is Dr. Jason Zuidema, who holds two very important roles when it comes to seafarer advocacy. One, as General Secretary at International Christian Maritime Association, and second, as the Executive Director at North American Maritime Ministry Association. And if you're listening to this for the first time, this is not a religious podcast, but there is a ton of great outreach here that's done. Last year we had Reverend Mark Nesselhut of SCI come on. Jason's been a wonderful supporter of the podcast and given some great feedback and mentioned the podcast in some of his own newsletters and does some wonderful advocacy for seafarers. And we thought we'd have him on today to give us his view on digitization and how it impacts seafarers' health, mental, physical, as well as, that also impacts trade and commerce. Jason, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming on, and thank you for being a huge supporter.
Thanks, Chris, for the invitation. I love podcasts. I like your podcast. It's been great to hear all of the folks over the last year or so talking with you, and it's great to finally be here myself.
Well, thank you very much. Jason has been wonderful because he actually gave me some really cool tips. Like, I know some of you now listen to this podcast in 1.2, 1.3, 1.5 speed, which I know, Jason, you do, which it kind of blew me away a little bit, which is really kind of cool to learn how people use software, use technology. And let's just jump right in, talk a little bit about technology and the work that you do, because it is important. And one of the things I like to talk about here, are seafarers, because it is the glue that holds everything we do together, no matter who we're talking to, ship owner, operator, tech person, U.S. Coast Guard. We have the glue as the seafarer, and that glue is super important for our economy and trade, but it requires some care, and certainly what's happening in the digital world is changing that. Talk a little bit about what you're doing and kind of what you're seeing today.
I work for these two organizations, NAMA and ICMA. Essentially, they do the same thing. It's overlapping work. One is the Regional Association of the various Seamen's Church and Seafarers missions in North America, and the other one's just a bigger, wider global one. That's the same kind of groups, but the rest of the world. There's about 55 or so of these groups in North America, perhaps 750 of these groups around the world. Some of the listeners might know them as Seamen's Mission, Seamen's Churches, Missions to Seamen, Sailor Society, Stella Maris. Depends where you live in the world, depends who your local Seafarers mission is. Well, our day-to-day work for lots of our groups is visiting seafarers on board their ships, bringing them ashore, bringing them to our Seafarer Center, and providing them with really a warm welcome in port. For the last 20 some odd years since the internet has been a thing, that's definitely been one of the highlights of our work, is trying to provide a Wi-Fi signal for those seafarers coming into the ports around the world. It's been the number one thing they've requested, probably at least for the last 20 years, let's say, give or take. And that's something really important. And in giving that connection, we get to talk to them, in giving them a friendly welcome. They tell us about their lives, tell us what frustrates them, tell us what their needs are. And I think that's the giving of the Wi-Fi signal is so much more than just about being able to doom scroll through some social media account. It's so much more than that. And it's primarily and especially to be a quality of life thing, to be able to communicate with their families, to be in touch with news from back home, to just be sort of aware of things, just like all the rest of us want to be aware of things and be in contact with our families as well.
A theme that comes up pretty often on this is just being in touch with families. And it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because if we're dealing with something that's going on with the family member, for some of us that work from home, okay, you just go upstairs and figure out why are you texting me, just come downstairs. For some, for the majority of people who are working from office, you deal with it, you get home. How has technology kind of been that double-edged sword? Because you can find out about something that goes on, but yet you're maybe on a ship heading to Singapore in the middle of the Indian Ocean, and you have no ways to affect change or to really to kind of lend a helping hand or kind of firsthand of the situation. How are the seafarers dealing with that, with the advancement in technology, where you're getting more connectivity and but yet at the same time have to still deal with real-time problem?
Great question. I hear this quite often at the various seafarers and shipping conferences that I go to. I think the frame for this is not, is this a seafarer problem? I think actually this is a human problem. So this is if I work with seafarers who are young men, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, let's say, they're like any other young men or young women who work on board there or at home. So the issues of communication are the sort of antisocial side of social media, all that sort of thing. This is I think a global human problem, not just a seafarer problem. I would push back though from those who might want to limit internet on board, because I think there's actually, often it's said, yeah, you get news and you can't do anything about it. I'm not entirely certain that's true, because I think it's not just communications that we're getting. It's not just a sort of a one-way communication that seafarers have, but they do actually have tools where they can respond to things at home. They have much more ability to move around their finances, for example. There's lots of new tools, new financial instruments that you can use on your when you have an internet connection that gives you the ability to actually respond to things that are happening at home. Lots of just the myriad different ways of communicating, again, give you a chance to be in touch with home. And I think, again, seafarers are sort of voting with their feet. They're saying, yeah, it might be problematic, but still, it's something we want. And for anyone who's paying attention to recruitment and retention, having an internet signal on board a ship is super important for seafarers.
I know, having a discussion recently with someone in the Coast Guard, that is a huge problem that is starting to manifest, and that is, seafarer recruitment and retention. And I think, the question, he actually posed the question to me. He said, well, how do we change this, Chris? How do we, how do we make it an attractive lifestyle? So I posed that question to you, using digitization as kind of in the background here. How does that help? How does it help seafarers? How does it hurt seafarers? And how do companies address this need and using digital tools? Because I think that's what a lot of people want. They want to be tech savvy. Well, the name of this podcast is The Last Dinosaur. If you're, using, I had on somebody who was talking about cybersecurity. I think he noted 25% of all ships, some number like that, have Windows 7. Well, if you're using Windows 7, maybe it's time to upgrade, because, you have young men and young women who want to be they want the tech savvy part, because seafaring is part of their career path, not only their career path. Like myself, I spent 4 or 5 years out at sea, and it was like, just, okay, I want to do this now, move on. But if you're 4 or 5 years now, tech savvy, you go out of sync for half that time, that's a huge step back, I think. So I think that's some of the stuff to address. Is that what's your take on it?
I have a few scattered thoughts on this, but here goes. First, I would agree, speaking to many younger seafarers, it's just sort of unthinkable to go to a place for a number of months without internet. That's just not something anyone who would choose to
right.
go without without internet for a long time.
Yeah, that's
and I suppose we might get into this, but there's a huge change happening this year in the whole internet on board space. Many major companies have adopted Starlink this year. This is, I think, having a seismic impact on the amount of internet that's on board. Many, even the other satellite internet providers have doubled, tripled, quadrupled, or more the bandwidth they have on board and many ships. So there's just so much more internet on board in sort of a 1 year time frame. Even this time last year, there were still big swaths of the industry that didn't have super good connections.
Yeah.
But earlier this year, many of the cruise lines announced all sorts of programs, just to give, for example, free WhatsApp, free text-based messaging for all of their crews. Most cruise lines give that now. And then huge companies that are either management companies or ship owners who have rolled out Starlink or comparable services across their fleets this year. I think things are really changing in that space. Um, I I've also been to a number of different meetings this year of industry types who are talking about things like it's sort of connected issues of future fuels, future technologies, all these sorts of things. I think seafarers definitely are expecting more technology, expecting better connectivity on board. But I think some of it's not so much my controversial thought about it, but really a thought to think about, that it's not so much the issue of connectivity, sort of social and being connected with family, that's causing anxiety, but it's a lot of the training and thinking about how humans are going to be interacting with all that new technology, and the things that operate the future fuels, et cetera, in the future. So are we as an industry? It's one thing. It's sort of the intractable, the real troublesome problem of what the fuel will be in 2050. But my question behind that is, who are the humans running those
fuel? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
those things, and that might be, to me, that's an equally big problem.
I think that you're exactly right. I think that, as we are starting to get on, and it actually, I think, poses potentially a great opportunity, because there is some technology, whether it's future fuels, whether it's sail technology. I mean, that's kind of new old. What's new is what's old is new again, I think is the right phrase, right? Because we're putting sails on ships or hard type rudder type things that are helping. You look at all these things, and if I'm a tech savvy young person at the forefront of reducing my footprint, right, and working for a company that is actively, and it may not be the best way, right? We could talk about LNG. Well, it's not as good, yeah, but it's better than where we are, and it's a bridge fuel, and it gets us to maybe use methanol ammonia, but that's not perfect. Well, it's not perfect now, but it could be. So there's all these sort of kind of arguments, but if you're kind of working with that to then bring that ashore and to further your career, I was on, I think it was what Maersk had their, the methanol first, the Laura Maersk, I think it was, that was featured in Rotterdam a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was, Copenhagen that called there and they christened it. I mean, could you imagine being a 25-year-old, engineer on that ship? Oh yeah, I'm the second assistant engineer on a ship that was the first methanol fueled ship. That's a great level of experience. So I think that goes to your point, is how do you train people? Like, are we preparing them enough, whether it's virtual training that could be done, again, going to connectivity, or what is it like, in-person training, once you're home from a tour, to go in and to learn about these things. But I do think that that's a big gap, I guess.
Yeah, my fear in this is some of the training impedes on some what would normally be, your vacation time, or your downtime, or rest time, or other things, and it just I think it's just one more thing that seafarers need to think about, and perhaps causes anxiety, causes pressure on them, and it would I think have, again, impacts on recruitment and retention. I note it's at so many of the meetings that I go to, that finding seafarers in general, for the ratings, for example, there are various fantastic countries that provide lots of seafarers at for some of the lower ranks. But as soon as you need some specialized people with significant numbers of years of experience and specialized training, it's increasingly slim pickings. And I worry about some of those things, some of the more skilled workers in the future. And I know there's lots of people working extremely hard in this space to find them, and yet it's a very difficult environment for recruitment.
Yeah, and I think, the question that always gets positioned to this industry in particular is what can we do to improve our reputation? I think the only time you hear about seafaring or shipping or maritime is, I've used this a million times, and I'm sorry for my regular listeners, is when, the Evergreen ship goes sideways in the Suez Canal and you can't get toilet paper at Walmart. But that's kind of that's all I care about. Or years ago, the oil spill or what have you. Looking at from your point of view, what can we do to improve this to get numbers that could help, improve retention and get people interested in our industry? And does the digital and technology side play a role in that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I wish I could give you an easy answer that you could that we could then easily found a school and be very successful at this, but it's not. It's difficult. And there are lots of other industries that are equally important that also have recruitment retention challenges. So it's not as if shipping is alone in this world. I think there's a sort of a few things that happen. One is indeed shipping sort of does work well when it's not necessarily in the foreground. It's nice to be in the background and just work and do its work without necessarily having to the foreground everything that it does. Shipping, it's sort of one of those things, logistics, when it just happens and things show up at your that you have the feeling that things show up at Walmart. People are happy when everything just works. Then companies, I think, are doing well. Sometimes, however, the desire to work in the background works against shipping, and it doesn't seem like as an exciting career as some of the other parts of the logistics chain. There's no doubt that shipping since the beginning is difficult because you're far away from family, you're far away from your friends, you're far away from your social networks, and it is difficult to be far away from family. But the shipping story is such a good story. I think shipping is not just necessary, but it's honorable. It's something that consider, like many seafarers from developing nations who perhaps start their careers when they're 18, work until they're 40 or 50. It means they've given if they have like 9-month contracts, let's say, something a lot of Filipino or Indian, Chinese seafarers might have 10 months a year contracts. It means from the age of 18 till 50 or so, they've given up the vast majority of their life. So if it was just a 2 or 3 year thing, it was sort of like a fling when they were a kid and they did a little bit of, I went to sea for a few years. It was fine. And then I went ashore. It's one thing, but a lot of seafarers, it goes beyond just, I did that thing and it was fun for a few years, but it goes into, I really gave up my life for my family. It wasn't just a small sacrifice, but I basically gave everything that I can be for most of my life, and I think remembering that it wasn't just a fling, but most seafarers are out there in a sacrificial mode, let's say, not primarily to get you toilet paper, but primarily to care for their families and make a house and put their kids through school, all those sorts of things. Very often seafarers also are supporting extended family members.
Yeah.
Often there can be 5 to 10 people, others who are getting regularly some sort of support for a seafarer. So thinking about it in those terms, I think, is really really important. And the more we can do to show honor back, to say thank you for these folks who are sacrificing their lives for us and for their families, I think is important.
I couldn't say it any better, because I never thought of it like as a fling. I guess I had a 3 or 4 year fling with seafaring. For me, it was kind of like, just like, okay, check that box, do that. I want to do something different, but you got to have a little bit of bona fides when it comes to you could, whether it's operations or chartering or anything else, you could say, well, I worked on a ship. Now, even now, I say I worked on the ship. That was a long time ago, and those ships were very different than what we see today. So how much that carries forward, other than a kindred kind of connection, is I'm not too sure. But one of the things we talk about is just good and the bad and the ugly of digitization. We kind of covered that a little bit. Any other thoughts there? I mean, as we've kind of seen, as you've seen your career progress, what kind of overall, do you feel this is a positive thing? It sounds like that you do feel that it's positive that we're moving to digital. What are you kind of looking for in the future? Let's say, like what would you hope for that people consider in the future as they owners and management companies move more and more to the digital realm?
Yeah, it's a great question. Some of this I I don't speak of from an insider. I personally haven't worked on a ship, and I haven't worked for a shipping company, so I don't want to pretend like I have great wisdom in this. I'm more basing it on what I hear from seafarers. I think some of the things where digital works great when it gets out of the way, when it's thought about, when the users are thought about, and not just the end product is thought
The
about.
output, yeah, the output,
The
yeah,
output. And
yeah.
so thinking about the tools that actually reduce workload and don't in an unexpected way add to the workload or to the anxiety or the pressure of seafarers. Certainly for the last several decades, seafarers talk a lot about, especially those who have to do it, the paperwork burden. Any kind of digital solutions that could reduce paperwork, I think, and automate some things would be wonderful. To me, that would be a real win for seafarers, where they might not have pressure, the same kind of pressures when they come into port to deal with the kind of paperwork burdens that they have. Again, I'm speaking out of school. This is above my pay grade. I don't know all of the paperwork that goes into things. I'm just saying seafarers, especially those whose job it is to fill all that stuff out, can sometimes feel real pain. That's a real pain point when coming into port, when it's sort of like the traditional way of recruitment and retention for seafarers was see the world, go to sea. It's wonderful. Let's go to
Yeah.
sea. But so much of seafaring now is see the world from your porthole, and
Yeah.
you won't get to go ashore because the turnaround time's too quick. There's too much paperwork. There's too many inspections and all that sort of thing. So anything that could make visiting ports around the world more interesting, I think would be wonderful. And if there's some sort of digital tools that can work in that direction, I think that would be one thing that would be useful. I think that the another one that I was sort of alluding to is I think there's going to one of, I think your initial questions was bringing more internet on board, so Starlink on board, but then having clarity on how to manage that on board. Indeed, if seafarers, like anyone, if there is no training about how to use, what are digital best practices, and sort of seafarers are using the Wi-Fi connections in ways that are not conducive to good work, but also to their social lives, then maybe there's more training for them that's available. Truth be told, all of us probably need some of that to have better work-life balance and to do things better. I think all of us need more training on how to do some of these things. But also, I think alongside digital things, and again, to sort of speak to your other question, one of the things that's frequently said is that seafarers used to come and sing karaoke together and do social things together, and now once the internet comes on board, they go to their cabins and they don't necessarily talk to each other. I push back on that a little bit because I don't think that's actually entirely true. But more than that, even back then, social life on board takes someone to coordinate it. Barbecues on board just didn't fall out of the sky. It's not as if they just, you showed up after work and there was a barbecue. Somebody had to plan it. The cook and the catering department put in a lot of effort to make those barbecues happen. Lots of other things. It took effort to make social life happen. And I think that's something that is, it's not the internet and connectivity that's the thing that inhibits social life on board. It's that someone needs to take that effort to make that happen. And I think that's true on board. It's true in our homes. It's true in our schools. It's true in our society, that it really takes effort to do that. And I think that's something shipping companies probably can put more emphasis on.
Absolutely. And I think there's another part as you're talking here, and something that comes up is and it sounds like at least some companies, again, not being an expert like or not even having exposure like you have, is access to remote mental health. We think we services, which again is something that generationally younger folks are more apt to be open to, whereas maybe some of the more senior guys are, or gals aren't. But I do think that that's something that probably is a continually evolving type thing as well, which is going to be reflective on how much accessibility one has to the internet.
That's a great question. A really important topic. Just last week, I was with the International Association of Maritime Health Providers at their convention, and a number of them are actually in the mental health space directly. So as medical professional medical care practitioners, those in the mental health space. And I think there's something important here to make the distinction. When talking about mental health, there's the sort of two layers. One is mental health in terms of those that actually need to speak to a registered psychologist, or need psychotherapy, or need something, need medication, for example. That's one level. But then there's just sort of general conversation, someone who is just sort of dealing with life like all of us, who needs to have that, someone to talk to and someone to work through on with things. I think those are two separate questions, and related, but important to distinguish. For the first, there does need to be some access to real mental health professionals, and there are certain countries, certain shipping companies that have those those resources, and I think those are to be provided. It does happen at sea, but it's also on land, where people have real mental health crises, where they need much more significant and professional help, and for which they might need medication, or might need to be taken off the ship and sent home. Those cases are very real, and it's something, especially when there are questions of suicidal ideation, or when crew members are noticing, and one of their crew members who might be thinking in that direction, that those crew members know what to do, know where to go, know what resources are available for resources for seafarers to talk to. I think on the other level, the other level, though, it's the more general level. Besides just sort of the professional help that seafarers might need, there are, I think, seafarers, like the rest of us, need folks to talk to, but seafarers in specific live in social isolation. They're very far from their families, far from general society, and so having more opportunities to talk together, to talk with people on the outside, is so important. It's where our seafarers welfare networks really thrive in the sort of wellness side of things, is being a person that seafarers can talk to.
I think that you bring up a great terminology and a great distinction between folks who need, some more serious focused mental health, and then some who just more of a wellness, kind of keeping it on track so it doesn't go down that road, or maybe not as severe, but certainly hinder work or hinder kind of your overall feeling. As we kind of come to a close on our time, I love to ask this question. We kind of hinted around it. So if you're out there talking to people at university, maybe they're at thinking about going to a nautical university, or maybe somebody who's going into your side where it's the seafarers health, and they said, Jason, I'm thinking about a lot of different. I have this opportunity to work with you or your networks, or to work as a ship owner, or to, maybe my son or daughter would like to be a cadet at one of the academies. Why should they join our band of industry people? We kind of touched upon more of the bad stuff than the good stuff, but what are you hopeful for our industry, and not just from a seafarer's point of view, but from just an overall working ashore support staff or other types of things?
Yeah, the maritime industry is a long and wonderful history. I think again, we live at a point in history where we're especially those of us. I live in Canada, you live in the United States. We live in a place where we have this amazing choice of jobs we can have. So one of the challenges we have here is that many young people have this, embarrassment of riches of so many different choices, where they can work ashore, they can work on ship, they can sort of do what they want. So that's something. So we live in this, sort of the competition is not shipping versus other bad jobs or something, but it's shipping as one among many wonderful careers that young people can have. But shipping does have something, I think, that many other careers don't have, and that is to be right in the middle of the connections we have as humans, the sort of the global connections we have. So if you want to work in some other field where you're sort of uh, I think sometimes you feel as if, if you're working downtown New York, or if you're working, some other big city, that you're in the thick of the action of the world. But that's not where globalization is happening. That's not where where things are happening. If you're on board a ship, that's you're actually right in the middle of action, even if you feel like you're out in the
In
middle
the
of
middle of
nowhere.
nowhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
on board a ship. But that's where the real the goods of the global economy are being exchanged. It's often said that 80 or 90% of all the goods that we have, everything in Walmart, let's say, is coming from overseas, came primarily on a ship. And if you want to be part of that, I think it's so important to have folks join the maritime industry, especially for Canadians, Americans, and many others around the world. Shipping in general are wonderful jobs. Good pay, great benefits, especially a lot of American Canadian companies are really, really good companies, great employers. And
Yeah.
I think it's also something, it's just a career that you can count on for very long term. And so
Yeah.
I would definitely encourage young people to get involved.
Yeah, even with changes, that are happening, and oh, my job will be different and things like that. AI, we can talk about AI out the, but there are always going to be human in the loop. There's always going to be a need. And somebody on the tech side who came from outside of the industry, who founded a company I interviewed a couple of weeks ago, Vision, Kyle Henderson. I think he was the one that said, if you make a 1% improvement in global trade, it has this massive impact, rather than I made a 5% working at a tech company doing, like a Uber for dogs or something. We were just kind of joking around about that, but think about making, and you impact that trade. You're working on an LNG ship, you're working on a coal, you are actually impacting trade. You are impacting emissions. If you're reducing them, you're doing all these things that are just actually having a material, a bottom line impact. And I think that's, to me, what attracted me was the connectivity. Was like, wow, like there is life beyond where I grew up, and there are cultures beyond where I grew up, and people do things differently. And this is like, but yet we're all connected. One of the things that I love to talk about is I was at a Parisian shipbroker dinner. This is probably about 20 years ago. And I was at a dinner, and we went to a cocktail reception, and then went to an after hours dinner club. And it was a broker friend of mine, and there were people from all over the world, including sitting next to somebody from Iran, and that was just 20 years ago, before some of the heavy sanctions. But, that was kind of like, he does the same thing that I do, wow, that's kind of wild. And, the other guy, there was some people from all over the world. I was the only American on the table. And it was kind of to realize that our common bond was something outside of living in the United States or so on. It was very, very interesting to think about it. And it was one of the things that attracted me to this industry for sure. One of the things I love to ask, I'm going to change up a little bit, is, being a very busy person. I know you were traveling recently, and you said you're doing a lot of traveling. Do you have time to read? And if so, and you could say, I listen to audiobooks as well, because I've had a few people say that you're a big podcast guy, but are you reading anything? Or I've had people tell me they're writing a book. Are you writing anything these days?
I am all of the above is
All right.
true. I'm trying to write right now a history of seafarers' welfare in North America. So stay tuned for whatever year that will come out in.
All right.
But I love to listen to audiobooks, and you mentioned it. Here's a pro tip for your listeners. Yeah, if you've never tried it before, try to start listening at some faster speed when you're listening. So right now I listen to podcasts, because at the on my iPhone you can only listen to it at 2 times, but if you have an app like Libby, you can actually listen to books at 3 times speed. So I typically listen about 2.5 or 2.75 depending on who's listening. So I just finished yesterday the 19-hour book of Walter Isaacson's Elon Musk, biography, which was fascinating. So it was 19 hours. So I had enough time between my house and Stanford this week to listen to it there and back, even though it was only not about 8 hours, I guess, or so to listen to the book. So that was fantastic. So there's a pro tip. And also, yeah, it was really, really fascinating to listen to this biography of Elon Musk, who's a fairly troubled gentleman, but yet has been so prolific in all of his different careers and still is, I guess.
Yeah, really very, very interesting. I am in the middle of a couple of different books, some fiction, some nonfiction, but that is a pro tip. I remember when you told me that, I think you were only listening to like 1.5, 1.7 at the time that you mentioned how fast you listen to podcasts. And I'm like, I actually listened to a work recording the other day. I felt a little guilty. It was 1.2, but it wasn't that much of a cadence difference. It just kind of cut down on some of the pauses in between, and I was able to listen to something a little bit faster. So, Jason, thank you for coming on the podcast. I once again, I appreciate all the support and for the podcast. As well as all the work that you do for the Seafarers. Again, the glue that keeps everybody together. Given that this is the holiday season, do you have any place where our listeners can make a donation to any of the charities? Do you have anything you'd like to mention before we end the podcast here?
Yeah, we have the great privilege. It's a very long-standing tradition at our Seafarer centers to give Christmas gifts to each seafarer they see. So if you're living anywhere near a Seafarer center, there's about 55 in North America, again, about 700 around the world. If you're living next to one, then get in touch with them, and maybe you can help either donate directly or donate some items for those Christmas gifts. Otherwise, we can't run on fumes. We run with finances. So if you'd like to donate to a local Seafarer center, please do so, both as your company, but especially reach into your own pocket and donate to that Seafarer center. There's often gala dinners or other fundraisers that are happening at those Seafarer centers. And if you've never been to one, then go visit, see what the Seafarer Center is like. You might be the next person to be a volunteer or a helper in some way. We always need help. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and I'll include that in the show notes, those links there as well, because it is an important mission that, like I said on the top of the show, is non-denominational and yet everybody benefits. So it's a great thing to do. Jason, once again, thanks for coming on the podcast.